Hey guys, hope all is well. This is episode 59 of the Rugby Recap. You have myself, Rugby Itch, as well as the Kiwi lads. First one, man, how you doing?
I'm doing all right, Tim. It's going to be a weird weekend. There's not much rugby that's actually taken place, but of course, next weekend, that is when we start to really get fired up with international rugby. We got a bit of a taste for it in last week. We saw a couple finals, and now we've got a whole heap of squads that have been announced, which it's been some exciting names, some massive, notable miss-outs, I guess you could say, which I'm sure we will talk about throughout this podcast as well. But how are you doing, Tim? The Blues, victorious for the first time in a very long time in Super Rugby. How are you feeling?
It's awesome. I can't really comprehend it, really. Like, it's one of those where, I mean, going into the game, as most of you guys know, I was pretty confident going into it. But again, it just comes down towards how you play in those 80 minutes. And, man, the Blues just dominated that game. Like, that's kind of just simply put, they just dominated that game. And the Chiefs really they didn't have any moments that I can kind of remember where, not to their like fault, by the way, just that they weren't like just be able to kind of like cross the line as many times. They're going to be more clinical, just have as many chances, because the Blues, from a defensive point of view, were just really solid throughout this game. And that's kind of what prevented the momentum kind of swinging towards their favor as the game kind of went on. But man, the Blues just, yeah, they did the damage in that first half and just took care of the work, and let the second half speak for itself. And yeah, we got the dub. We got the dub. But it's just crazy to still say. Like, I mean, I've been supporting this club since 2011, and it's crazy to think, just the dark days, you can say, of supporting this club. Just kind of finished in the bottom of Super Rugby for a lot of years, but to kind of get to where we are, to get to where we have, it's unbelievable. But what was your perspective of the game? Because I know that I think you probably have a different. I mean, this is probably from most actually neutrals. Actually, you'd say, like, from a Blues fan's point of view, I think most Blues fans would obviously love it. But from a neutral, or just from someone who, I mean, if you're a Chiefs fan, then maybe it's a different perspective. But if you're a neutral fan, then you would kind of want something more out of this game, I suspect.
Yeah, I think a lot of people thought it was a bit of a disappointing final. No discredit, of course, to the Blues, but
I understand that.
Straight away they played a great game of rugby, and the Chiefs unfortunately just didn't really show up for the game. And it was interesting because I think the closest game of the Super Rugby Pacific quarterfinals, semi-finals, and final, I think the closest game was 11 points difference. So we didn't really get any close games going down to the wire. All of the games were almost predetermined by around that 60-minute mark. But yeah, full credit to the Blues and what they were able to do throughout the season. They were hanging in there up against some of the top sides and then managing to make the most of it in those important moments. But I think people wanted a bit more from a final. And I know that a lot of people were saying, of course, the final will be better without the Crusaders in there. But maybe it would have been a closer game if the Crusaders had somehow been involved. Yeah. I know that sounds like a critical statement, but normally when we see a Super Rugby Pacific final involving the Crusaders versus the Chiefs, like we saw last year or any of those games, they at least, they keep it close, and that kind of adds to the thrill of a Super Rugby final, whereas like this game was won in the first half, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, it really was. I mean, just to add to your points, I mean, I do agree that like a team like the Crusaders could have added a lot more tension going into this game, because as I said back in 2022 when the two sides faced off in that final, like, I felt more tension going into that because of kind of the pedigree that the Crusaders have in terms of their history and winning championships, and just how good they are in terms of finals. So you're definitely right that if they were to be involved, if they were in that final, then yes, it would be a lot more kind of nerve-wracking to watch, definitely from a Blues perspective. But at the same time, I also kind of appreciated that we had two different teams in the final that weren't the Crusaders, because we also need a bit of change, and that's something which Super Rugby needs as well. We can't just have a dynasty that kind of continues on for like 10 years plus. Like, we need to kind of stop it a bit, or have a new dynasty, which is something which I think could happen. But it's one of those where I thought the final was great. I mean, a lot of fans turned up, which is good to see from a spectator point of view, and for Super Rugby in general. I mean, this year, I think overall, actually, in terms of figures, actually, from a viewership standpoint, actually did pretty well for Super Rugby. So, that's kind of good to see. But yeah, in terms of the final, just unbelievable. I mean, they do it at Eden Park as well. It just makes it even more sweeter. And it's kind of crazy to kind of how that happened, kind of like to make it like, because we came second. Like, we actually came second, and the Chiefs came fourth. So it's actually even like more bizarre actually that these two teams are actually in the final than you'd expect of a 1st and 2 kind of combination to go into it. So I don't know if we'll see this often, or I can't remember as many times this has ever happened in terms of like a final where the second team and the fourth team went off in the final. But no, overall, I'm pretty happy as a Blues fan. I was just, yeah, it was incredible to watch. I mean, Akira, I thought played very well in that game, getting a try, well, the opening try in the game. And yeah, just kind of a good send-off for him. I mean, Caleb Clark, like, unbelievable, getting a hat trick in this game. I mean, that I think was it the first try? I think it was that first try he scored, like where, I mean, Reiko kind of won out, passed the ball to Akira, he went out, and then passed the ball again to Caleb Clark. I was like, I didn't think it was a try. I honestly looked at it like 4 times, and I was like, okay. I mean, I knew Reiko got the pass off without a doubt. I was so confident in that. Like, he got the pass off. It was whether with Akira went down to the ground. But I think what happened was that a player was underneath Akira, which kind of allowed him to kind of pass the ball. I was like, is that allowed? I wasn't sure.
I don't know where that rule is in terms of what the actual official kind of ruling would be for that, because then you could start seeing, I know that it shouldn't happen, it probably wouldn't happen, but why don't you just stick your props on the sideline to stop you from going out and then just lie on them, pass the ball back in.
Make a whole line just in the 22-meter zone so you can use them as support as you put the ball down. Yeah.
Like, how many players can you put in next to the sideline before you're considered out? Can you just like lie on players out of the field of play?
Yeah.
Like, where is the line? But
it definitely caught me off guard. Let's just say that it caught me off guard. But man, like, what a kind of well-worked try by both the Ione brothers there. And then I mean, Caleb just had a good game. I mean, I think it was his 3rd try was really impressive. Actually, just the kind of break he had in terms of that one. I mean, I'm trying to think who else scored. I mean, AJ Lamb got a try for himself, which is deserves. I think he's had a really good season for the Blues. I mean, I think he's been up there. I mean, I know he wasn't actually put in the conversation of like most improved this year for the Super Rugby Awards, but I think he's actually up there. I think he's had a really good year for the Blues, and honestly, I think he could now be the Blues' next 12. I mean, that may be a bold claim just because I know Bryce Heem has been so good for the Blues over the past few years, but you also have to understand that he's like 34 now, or like 35. So he's going to kind of getting to that age where we need to kind of bring a bit more youth into that. And AJ Lamb has been a bit unfortunate, I guess, in the previous years to kind of not find that starting place. And previous players haven't been able to find it as well, like, including like Amoni Nawa, who was playing for the Chiefs, as well as Jacob Lataruki-Nemkins, who's now playing for the Highlanders. So it's one of those where it's tough to get into those winger spots with Martelea and Caleb Clark there. And yeah, I think he kind of slots in there, I think, nicely. And again, there's actually the opportunity for him to even play 13, actually, because Reiko actually may go to Japan next year for his sabbatical. So there's an opportunity for him to play at 13. So yeah, we'll see what happens. But no, overall, I was very impressed by the Blues. Again, Patrick Tubeloto, another player who was good. Kind of, I think he played 55 to 60 minutes, I believe, in this game. So that's a good enough amount of time, of course, to get selected, which we'll talk about later. But yeah, overall, just really happy that the Blues were able to get the job done. And yeah, I mean, respect to Ver Connor as well, to kind of come into your first season of Super Rugby, well, in a very long time, let's just say, and to kind of just do it in your first season with the Blues, like it's just awesome. But like I said, we're gonna go for the another. We're gonna go for the double. We'll see if we can make it happen. But anyway, we'll move away from Super Rugby. I don't want to annoy you guys of how much I love the Blues and what they're able to accomplish this year. But okay, we'll move on then towards the URC final that of course happened as well. And this is actually one that kind of caught us off guard, really, because both of us actually predicted the Bulls to win this game. So for Glasgow to actually come up on top, I mean, wow, fair play. I mean, they won the game, I believe, what was it, 21 points to 16. So it was a very close game in general. And it was actually the Bulls who were actually pretty comfortable in that first half. Like, they actually looked like they were going to go on to win this game. But Glasgow, man, they came back into this and kind of just grasp it. So fair play to them. Fair play. I mean, what was your thoughts on this game?
Well, it came down to what I mentioned in that semi-final between Glasgow and Munster, and it was whoever had the better defence in that game was going to win that contest. Yeah. And in the end, of course, Glasgow away from home managed to get the job done there. as well. But I saw their tackling stats throughout this game. They ranged around that 90% pretty much throughout the whole contest, whereas the Bulls, at times they were dropping as low as 77% of their tackles being made, and it really started to show in that second half because, you know, we talk about altitude and the fact that it was at Loftus and that was supposed to wear down Glasgow, but the Bulls almost had to make double the tackles that the Glasgow Warriors did, so that was wearing down on them more than anything. But I don't know, it just seemed like the Bulls coming into the game, they were just a bit complacent or something along those lines. Like that first half was good, but the second half, it almost seemed like they had lost that edge and they seemed to just accept the fact that they were going to be able to win it no matter what, and they were expecting that altitude to start helping them out, and it just wouldn't because Glasgow didn't really slow down or lose a step. If anything, they got quicker throughout that second half than the first. So I think it was just a great performance from a pretty deserving champion in the Glasgow Warriors. Like when you look through at what they've done throughout the season, we've got to remember all four of the top sides all won the same amount of games throughout the regular season. So everyone was in the running. Everyone deserved to at least have a good shot of winning that trophy, and to win it in South Africa, I feel like is that extra feather in the cap for this Glasgow side.
Yeah, no, it was actually really well worked, actually, what Glasgow kind of came into the game, because they had a tactic similar to what they did in Munster. Like to win, I mean, away in Munster, but also in Victoria. I couldn't believe it. I was just like, when I saw the result, by the way, because I wasn't able to watch the game live, but like when I saw the result, I was like, oh my gosh, they actually did it. I was like, I couldn't believe, that's why I had to like go over the highlights and just kind of like just witness what happened. And man, man, fair play to them. I mean, that final play as well, like where they kind of defended that Bulls maul. I was like, man, I was like, they did well to stop it. That's for sure. So yeah, fair play to them. And it's actually a good thing for the URC actually in general. I mean, since URC is now officially started, we've had 3 different champions from 3 different countries, being Stormers, Munster, and of course now Glasgow Warriors. So it's actually kind of good for the competition, I think, overall, to kind of have that, and something which I would like to see also within Super B, I think, because I think at times, yes, you know, it's also nice to see kind of like we've had the Crusaders win for a number of years, and then we've had the Blues now win, which is kind of good to see from that perspective. But it's also, we want to see like an Australian team win, or even like the Fijian Drua kind of get one of their own if it can. So like I'd like to see if that's possible. But yeah, fair play to Glasgow, man. They stuck to it and yeah, got the job done. So yeah, man. I mean, who was out of that game that you were watching? Like, who was the player that kind of just impressed you the most from that?
Oh, it's just that physicality of the 4-pack, I think, that really helped them out. The trio of Matt Fagerson, Rory Darge, and then also, they have it number 8 in the end for Glasgow. I can't even remember what it was. We've said that many names over the weekend that I have lost track of everything. Yeah. I mean, Cameron Hanekom, I thought that for the Bulls, he was going to have a bit more of a performance here, but I think he's walked away with a bit of an injury, which is why he wasn't selected for the Springboks, which is a bit of a shame. But yeah, some of the Springbok guys, or at least the guys who we think were going to be Springboks, really didn't reach that next level throughout that game. And I feel like for Glasgow overall, you know, there were a few great standout performers, but as a team, I think that is something that seemed to work extremely well for them. Like Josh Mackay, he was getting involved anytime that he needed to, but he could back, you know, Tom Jordan. I thought he had a pretty good game for a young number 10. George Horn was strong at 9. Like, there were just a lot of players that gave about that 8 or so out of 10 performance, and that equaled the win in the end in an extremely close game as well. Like you said, that last one, who knows? The Bulls could have scored it, could have got themselves the conversion, and it could have gone the other way, which is what you want for a final, and not a 30-point hiding, Tim.
Hey, I'll take it from my perspective. but yeah, look, congrats towards Glasgow, because that's just unbelievable what they're able to do in that, in terms of the URC. But yeah, moving on, we did have the Springboks versus Wales game that happened throughout the weekend as well. So that was kind of, we were treated to some early rugby in terms of international rugby, which is good to see. And yeah, it was one of those games where I think going into it, a lot of people kind of expected the Boks to kind of do the job, and that's exactly what they did. I mean, I think they took their time, though, I'd say, about it. Like, they're very kind of, what's the word? They were very calculated in terms of how they wanted to kind of attack the Welsh in times. Because again, yes, they did score very early on for that Jesse Krill try, which was very well worked, actually, a very well worked try. But following, like, since that try, like, they kind of made a lot of like kind of like mistakes and kind of in there, which again you're going to get because it's the first game back in terms of international rugby, so it's understandable. But there are times where like they let the Welsh kind of come into this, and the momentum kind of changed into their favor. It's just that the Welsh just weren't able to kind of take advantage of that. But at the same time, the discipline from their point of view was also something that they needed to work on, because the the card count could have been more, really. Yeah, what was your thoughts on this game? Because I think there's a lot of positives, I think, from both sides, actually.
Yeah, I think Wales really held their own throughout that first half. Like, only 1 point difference going into half time, which was a lot better than some anticipated. Definitely after 2 early yellow cards for the Welsh, it didn't exactly set up looking too flash for them. One thing I will say, though, Tim, we got to see the new TMO laws in play, didn't we? In terms of the TMOs being able to check every single thing that they wanted to. And the game went for about 2 hours. So, World Rugby, you made the decision of taking away scrum resets because you wanted to speed up the game. You allow a TMO to get involved 15 times throughout a contest, which then makes the game even longer than if we just had scrum resets. So, what are we doing? Are we trying to speed up the game, or are we trying to make it 4 hours like NFL? Because that's the way it's going to end up going. The referee loved the sound of his own voice, so did the TMO, and those two were just having a banter session all throughout the 80 minutes. Well, should I say the 150 minutes that game felt like. But second half, Springboks really started to wind up a little bit more, getting themselves quite a few tries in a hurry, and, they were the fresher side in that second 40, and that really showed in the fact that the Welsh, once they started going behind, I'm going to have to say it, Tim, it was that forward pass for me that the Springboks scored off out wide for Makazole Mapimpi. That seemed like that really just absolutely set the gas tank of the Welsh. That seemed like their confidence was gone at that point. Now, they checked everything else, but they didn't check that one apparently. But I don't know what was going on.
I'm laughing, by the way, just because of the whole. You are completely right with the referees. Like, the more you said, I was like, actually that. I actually forgot, by the way, that the whole TMO rules were introduced, like the whole kind of new introduction rules. So now you just said it, I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, that's what made the game so horrible to watch, because just the amount of
horrible at times. We should mention though the Springboks, like, in anything that we're saying here, we're not discrediting what they were able to do throughout that game.
I mean, by the way, the referees did, and by the way, we're not. I'm not discrediting like the referees as well. I think like they did their job as they had to. I'm just saying the time and how it took. Like, it's just like, oh my gosh, I just wish there was better timing to it, because I mean, yes, the referees did their job, by the way. They did actually, like, they kind of implemented the new rules to see, because again, this is obviously a testing kind of phase to see what's going to happen. But yeah, I just think the game just kind of lasted too long in that essence. And yeah, well, I mean, look, we'll see if these rules change going forward. Again, it's still kind of a testing phase. Maybe that's kind of like one that is like an X in terms of like if it worked or not. Yeah, jeez. I mean, yeah, you are right in terms of that kind of pass, because it was one of those where I did look at it and I was like, that's a bit like generous to give, I'd say, to the Boks. It was one of those, I was like, oh, I mean, I actually like, it's like if that was against the Boks, I would feel a bit like, oh, I mean, like, come on, that's a bit of a hard call to give. But so I can understand from any Wales fan point of view how that kind of would be a kind of a, yeah, it's a call that you'd be like, wow, like, I actually can't believe that was given. But yeah, but look, in terms of the rest of the game, however, I mean, I thought the Boks did well to kind of just kind of control the game, particularly in that second half. I mean, Sasha Finberg Imgumuzulu, like his kick, like from what, like behind the halfway line, like, oof, it was a nice kick. I love the way he did it as well. Like, I've never like he just had a little balance to it. He's just like, just taking his time. He's like, boom, just put it over. So that was good stuff by him. And yeah, I guess Edwill van der Merwe as well, getting a try on his debut. I thought he was definitely the man of match for me. I mean, without a doubt. I mean, he just did so well from a defensive point of view as well. That kind of I think that's what kind of actually came more to mind really than kind of his attacking prowess. I think it was really more his defensive work that kind of I was like, wow, okay, we got something here. Because I mean, I'm not saying, by the way, when I say this, by the way, I'm not saying that he could get there. You never know. But I think he reminded me a bit about in that game of Severis, just about how Severis is very defensive minded. Like he's very attacking minded, of course, but he does the job defensively, and he does it very well from the breakdown. So I thought Edwill van der Merwe just in that game, that single game, did very well. So
I think that those two tackles in the middle of the field were probably his highlight in terms of his defensive effort because
Oh,
he had to
yeah,
make both of them or else
exactly,
Wales were going to be scoring. And,
exactly. It was
you
just
know,
unbelievable. I was like,
like
wow, this guy.
he showed that he's got that defense because throughout the URC season, I was talking about it before the game, I think he was only tackling around 80%.
Yeah.
But I think that he was a lot higher throughout that
Oh,
game up against
it
Wales.
must have been. Yeah.
Someone else who did really well was actually Upper Lelefasi as well. Like, I know a lot of people
Yes.
love to give him a lot of stick, but, you know, there was that boots incident that got him the yellow card. But other than that, like, under the high ball,
Exactly.
he
As I
was
say, under the high
spectacular
ball. Yeah.
throughout that game. And I'll be honest, that's something that if we're going to compare them to the All Blacks just for a second, I don't know if the All Blacks have that at the moment. Someone under the high ball at that ability. Because when you think about it, what do we got in terms of that back three? You got Peter Feta, you got Mark Delia. That man can't hold on to the ball to save himself at the moment.
I'd say Caleb Clark, though. I'd say Caleb Clark.
Yes,
he is the one.
But they're not going to target his wing, are they?
But this is the thing. But in a weird way, I'm saying Caleb Clark only from a kickoff standpoint because I can make the case he is the best player in the world in terms of winning balls from the kickoff. Like he did that so many times within the Super Rugby season. But then, and he's done it also at an international stage. But again, that's kind of we have to look back at previous years, kind of look at that because he hasn't been a part of the All Blacks kind of team for a while, but still he's been very good for I think I was really impressed by him. I was really impressed by Fassi in this one. Like he's someone which I definitely think will be in the conversation to kind of start or at least be a part of that at least 23-man squad to go against the Irish. So I'm intrigued to see if they actually go with him or not. Again, he has tough competition with the likes of Willie LaRue, but at the same time, is he available? I don't know because he wasn't available for that final. So
he was injured, wasn't he? But he's still been selected in the squad. It's a bit of a weird one though because Kurtley Arendse was supposed to be up for the Irish series, and he's back for the final. So makes it a little bit confusing. What do you think of? Well, he's another one that I don't think anyone really knows what he's situated at the moment. I think he's going to be available, but no one really knows.
We'll talk more about that when over the Springbok selection. But yeah, look, I thought this game overall just really just well done, really by the coaches as well. I thought the one thing I noticed as well was really what Tony Brown actually did in terms of kind of implementing kind of the attacking style play. Like I already saw like a few bits in there that I was like, okay, that's a bit of like what Tony Brown has kind of implemented into the Springboks. And yeah, man, if that just continues, then it's kind of good to see. Like he's kind of just adding that kind of attacking ability towards them, and just at a higher level, I believe. So yeah, it's good. It was good. But yeah, moving away then from that game. Again, moving on then towards the squad announcements. The first one being the Springboks, and yeah, again, I'd say in this one there weren't as many surprises because I also like the. By the way, I'm gonna say this I'm gonna say this once. I like the way the Springboks announced their squad, and the reason when I say this is because they announce it like where they have like the team, and again, it can be. I think they selected 38 players in total or something like that, like 38 players, or it's a good group of players they have there. And then they have a standby list. They even show you like players who will be on standby, and then players who are not selected because of injury. Like you don't really see that like a lot from like when the All Blacks announce the squad or like the Wallabies, which we'll discuss very shortly. They don't really announce that like within the actual like graphics or kind of like the actual like you kind of hear about that like through the media. So I just want to give the Springboks props on that front. They're very kind of upfront on that. But yeah, I mean like. What was your thoughts on this? Because I think there's a lot to go over here.
Well, there were, of course, those expected returns, the likes of Khaleesi, the likes of the players who have been playing a little bit later on in the overseas competitions, the likes of Kobus Reinach as well. Lukhanyo coming back for the Springboks. He's going to be an interesting one because I know that, once again, some people don't really like Jesse Creel. But at the moment, I feel like he's got to be a 13, doesn't he? He's been playing some very good rugby at the moment.
But we're going to probably do a video in the future around probably the box and kind of our lineups. But I think that is the hardest position to choose because for me personally, I love Lukhanyo. I love him so much because he's just how skillful of a player he is in terms of that 13 spot, but just how. He's just so good. But at the same time, his form hasn't been as good this year when you're comparing to the likes of Jesse Creel. And Jesse Creel, of course, was just sensational during that Rugby World Cup. So you got to give you. I think you just got to back the guy really at the end of the day. Kind of continue that kind of that combination of Dialende and him. But man, Lukhanyo Am, it's Lukhanyo Am. Like it's going to be a hard decision. It'll be a hard decision for sure. Because again, you have to introduce him at some point, I believe. But at the same time, do you do it in this island series? I don't know. Maybe it's too risky. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's too risky to do it, or do you think it's the perfect time to actually do it because it's island?
You're in a tricky boat, aren't you? Yeah. Because like this is such a short series. It's not 3 matches. You've only got 2. So if you lose the first one, you're playing for the series in the second, and you know you've got someone in Jesse Creo at the moment who does look like he's picked up from where he left off in terms of what he was doing last year. Lukhanyo Am, we haven't seen a huge amount of him, and maybe trainings will tell us otherwise, but you know, it's pretty tricky. It's the same situation with Damien Dialende. Do you go with Andre Esterhuizen in the Irish series, or do you go with Dialende, who hasn't had a single minute of action at international level since that Rugby World Cup? So, you know, it's a tricky one. I think that they will probably put Lukhanyo Am in at least one of those games, probably alongside Damien Dialende.
I hope so.
You know, it's going to be an interesting one with the Bulls players coming in as well. Someone who didn't get into the squad and also didn't even get into the standby backs, who I was quite surprised about, was actually David Creel. The fact that his name was nowhere to be seen, I felt like I had to give him a little shout out here because his season has been pretty strong, and when the Bulls have been in some trouble, he's actually been one of those players who have stepped up and been able to help them out. But I don't know whether or not he has some sort of injury. Maybe that was why he got left out. But otherwise, I would have had him in. Because, I mean, he played in that URC final, and yes, maybe didn't quite get much going, but neither did any of the Bulls players, really.
Yeah.
Do you find it interesting? Oh, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, another player that I'm thinking of just right now is actually similar towards him, is actually Ruhan Nortier. Like, I'm surprised he wasn't even selected because like he's not even like he's had a really good season for the Bulls, like in terms of that lock position, and he wasn't even on the standby list as well. So like I just felt he's been a bit hard done by as well, because he's 25 years old. Like he's been pretty good for the Bulls throughout the past few years. I just don't. But I don't know why they haven't gone with it.
Do you think that might be because they're saving that spot just in case for someone like a Ludiacha or one of those other locks who are injured at the moment coming back? I mean, they've got RG Snyman in there, Eben Etzebeth, Franco Mostert. Who are your other locks
that they've got? It's the fourth one, because normally it would be Lord Dianger, because recently he's had that whole heart condition that's kind of prevented him from playing rugby for a bit. That's why I'm saying that that fourth spot I believe is up for grabs, and I actually thought Ruhan Nortier was going to get it, but no, they decided not to kind of even put him in the team or even on the standby list. So I'm a bit surprised with that. But look, besides that, I mean, I think every other player deserves to get in. I mean, good to see. But the whole kind of controversy around Sia Khaleesi is over. He is going to be captain, which is what I think every Bulk fan wanted. And I love the comments, by the way, that Lassie made in the press conference as well. Like, yeah, because like the whole thing with the Montpellier, kind of what was it? The president kind of going against Sia for not being fit enough or all that. He's like, no, he's captain, and he's and he's like, what do you say? Like he's like not fat, or like he's fit, or like something along those lines. I was like, oh, that's classic Rassi. But no, I mean, just look, overall pretty happy with this. I'm trying to think of any names there that kind of caught me off guard. I mean, good to see Pepsi Butawezi in it. Again, Johan Grobbelaar as well. I'm happy that he's in over Joseph Dweba. I think that's kind of the right decision, really, because I've never been. I mean, I think Joseph Dweba's had too many opportunities now, and I think it's good to have, I think, another player in there like Johan Grobbelaar. So I like him in there. Who else? I mean, yeah, Evan Roos, good to see.
I mean, Jasper Wiese's in there at the moment, isn't he? But that's to serve as suspension.
Exactly.
So that he can start playing again by the end of the Rugby Championship, I think, is when he's going to be back in.
Even Warren Vandenberg. I mean, that's also one I'm actually surprised I've actually gone with him. I mean, you're gonna have to tell me, because I'm unaware why he's not in, and so you're gonna have to tell me. But why is Herschel Yankees not in the conversation? Like, is he not in the conversation anymore?
Yeah, just hasn't really been good enough throughout the URC season. To be honest, like Unfortunately for them, like, he's been all right, but I'd say that Paul de Vet has been just as strong as him in terms of that Stormers side. And, I mean, they have got the likes of a Reinach, and also, you know, you've got Williams, you've got Faf de Klerk, and then they've still got a fourth as well, don't they? Or did they just go with the 3 this time? I think they kept the 3 with the standby.
Well, isn't there Grant Williams as well? There should
Grant
be 4.
Williams, Cobus Reinach, Faf de Klerk.
And then
who's there? Vandenberg?
Yeah.
Ah, yes. Yeah. So, yeah, he's kept his spot. So, you can't really knock any of those guys out for Herschel Youngkies.
I agree with it, by the way. I'm actually happy with it. I'm just curious to see why. I mean, I just haven't watched the Stormers in a while, so it's one of those where I assume it just comes down towards form in that case. But yeah, besides that, I think it's a pretty good squad. Again, pretty strong overall, and yeah, it's definitely gonna be it's gonna be a good series against the Irish. It's gonna be a really good series against the Irish. So I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, in terms of the All Blacks squad announcement, I mean, this is definitely the one that I think caught a few people off guard, including myself, when I was doing my kind of live reaction to it. Because man, I was questioning everything about about the All Blacks in terms of like when they were reading out the names, and then they went to Cody Taylor, and I was like, wait, did they say Satutu? I was like, no, they must have said Satutu, right? Like I had to like go back and look at it, and then the graphics come up. I'm like, oh my gosh! I was like, I was just in pure shock. But before getting to my kind of perspective of it, what was your take on the kind of the whole squad? In particular, the uncapped players that have been included in it.
I mean, George Bell making his way in. I feel like that was probably one that. I mean, I did an original squad prediction video, and then I did an updated one where I made a couple changes.
I love that from you.
Well, the thing is, though, I started trusting other people, and then I got it further away from the actual squad than my original video.
Exactly. You know? This is why I was laughing so much. I was like, I kind of had a rough predicament, guys, like kind of what you were going to go with in terms of your squad. So, like, I knew kind of what you were going to go with your first squad, but then I love kind of like how you're like, guys, just like, I love your thumbnail. Like, I got it wrong, and then you did another one. I was like, "Oh, that's awesome, man! That's awesome."
Yeah, so, and then I got it further wrong.
Exactly. So, that's what
you know. It happens.
Oh my god!
But yeah. I think the biggest bolter was not George Bell. I think it was Basilio Tossi. I don't think anyone had him in their squads, and even Hurricane supporters probably didn't have him in their squads as well. He was one of the big surprises. Only 25 years of age though. Got a bright future by the looks of it. And they went with the 6 props and only the 3 locks, which I think is a bit risky. Because
I want to get on
last time, definitely last year anyway, their locks were very light. And they ended up with a few problems heading into that World Cup because they didn't have enough locks. And then they decided, you know what, we'll go with 3 this time.
Yeah.
And, you know, is it going to work? I think it will be all right. I don't think they'll end up with too many injuries, of course. Touch wood, but yeah, some interesting choices there. Scott Barrett as captain as well. What did you think of that announcement?
Yeah, I think everything that I've seen around like kind of the announcements and kind of just Razor speaking about it, I think it was kind of the sure thing pick in terms of like it was one of those where like it was more expected. I think in terms of his kind of selection, in terms of getting captain, and I think every fan will not have a problem with him getting selected because you know. It's Razor's guy in terms of what he's been able to kind of lead the Crusaders for the number of championships they've been able to win in Super Rugby. So I think from a communication standpoint, just in how he kind of talks to him, but as well as just how he's able to kind of lead the team, I think it's going to be really good to kind of I'm excited. I'm actually really excited because I will say the last time the All Blacks captain was announced, I was a bit like shocked actually in terms of like. In terms of what Sam came with. Again, Sam Cane, to be fair to him, he did pretty good at times actually under his captaincy. But I will say there's no question marks for me in terms of Scott Barrett. I think he's the sure thing there. So happy with him. With Tossi, I think Tossi's one where I was a bit surprised by his selection. Not saying, by the way, he doesn't deserve it. I just think in terms of like the split, in terms of like 5-3, like they could have gone with just 5. Like they could have gone with 6-3. They could have just gone with 5-4. I think that would have been better suited actually because you have like we've mentioned, there's Tamati Williams and Opportunity Fassi who could play both position. So I was a bit surprised they've gone with that, but I mean, there must be a reason for it. I mean, I guess they want to try out. I mean, again, we have to remember this is a part of a new cycle. This is a sort of a new cycle for every team here, and especially for the All Blacks, they need to kind of get new players involved. And so I understand the reasons behind including him. And again, he's had a good season for the Hurricanes, so I like it a lot. I mean, imagine a combination of him and Tamati Williams. Like, man, that is going to be a pretty big combination as a front row there. But yeah, in terms of the locks, I mean, I am a bit surprised. So similar to you, I mean, imagine if Tuipulotu was like injured. Like, what would happen in that case? Like, who because I know Sam Derry, I think, is part of the whole training kind of squad thing that they have going on. But yeah, I am a bit surprised by it because it's one of those where, I mean, going on to the loose forwards, I mean, it seems that they consider Simpini Finau as a player who can kind of cover in that position if needed. That's kind of what I kind of gauged from it. I mean, do you think there's another player who can do that job? And like, do you think like even Blackadder could be another player, or is there another player I'm not thinking of?
I don't think so. No. Has Jacobson ever gone into a lock before for the Chiefs? I know that he's one that they've thrown up in the air a little bit, but I don't think he's been a specialist lock at all.
I don't think
throughout his career, which is why I thought maybe like a Cullen Grace or someone might have a crack because of the fact that he also offers that locking cover. But yeah, I think that loose forward trio. I know that you want to say it, Tim, and I know you've been waiting all week to say it. Who's the player you feel should have been in that loose forward trio that they did not include?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I've made a whole video on this, by the way, guys. And I mean, I could have done a whole video similar to what actually 2 Cents actually did around kind of the 2-2 and the reasons why, or why he wasn't selected, or why he should have been. But yeah, just from my case, I mean, look, I mean, the guy has been incredible this year in terms of Super B, and he scored what 12 tries. He's had like 8 or 9 try assists. Like he's kind of, I mean, he's been a part of the Blues defense, which has been like kind of the best actually statistically in terms of Super B history. Like they've had the best defense in terms of Super B history, and he's been a big part of that because he's won the balls within the breakdown a ton of times for the Blues. But man, just I guess the thing that lets him down, and like the more I hear it, really just in understanding the reasons why he wasn't selected, was kind of coming down towards his tackling success and kind of just, I guess, the not even from meters. Actually, he has the most in terms of meters gained.
It's the defensive work rate.
Defensive work rate, yeah. So that's the one thing that kind of, I guess, lets him down from that aspect, and something which the All Blacks want more out of a player. And again, coming down towards, I guess, the players that were kind of chosen ahead of them, and what I believe were probably Luke Jacobson and Walter Titi, because again, those two players can cover eights. You know, Luke Jacobson obviously covered all 3 positions, but Walter Titi being a specialist in terms of 8 spot. So it's one of those where, yeah, I was very fascinated to see kind of how it went in terms of loose forwards, because not just kind of just talk more about it, like, by choosing Artis Sevilla, thinking him as an 8, that we said this from the very beginning. That is the defining thing in terms of the loose forwards. Like, do you consider him as a 7 or do you consider him as an 8? The All Blacks considered him as an 8, so that's why they were always going to only go with one kind of backup to him. That's fair. That's completely fair. And that's why they've gone with a lot of players who are very versatile and covering a lot of positions. So that's why I understand the reasons behind Jacobson being selected, because if they need it, you can play there. Similar to Blackadder. I mean, I'm trying to think who else can play there. Papali, if you needed to, but I mean that's not really where he plays. He's been playing more at 6 for the All Blacks in some cases if they needed it, or 7. But yeah, man, I was just shocked.
And I found it interesting what Razor said as well about how, you know, it was about both sides of the ball, not just the attack. Because, of course, we know that Satutu's got a lot of prowess when it comes to that attacking this year.
Yeah.
But, yeah, when you look at the minutes that he's played and the amount of tackles that he's made, it is pretty interesting. The fact that Wallace Satiti has had a lot less minutes and almost made as many tackles. And, you know, for me, once Satiti played those few playoff games he was in, the way that he was playing in those games,
that semi-final,
his work rate, you know, that's the kind of thing that selectors look for. I think Jacobson's probably relatively lucky to be in, to be honest, just because he is a penalty magnet. I saw that he averages 1.5 penalties against him per game. Throughout that Super Rugby Pacific season, he did end up conceding 23 penalties, which is which is impressive, you know.
Yeah.
It's a huge number. The props don't even concede
he is
that.
but he's probably the one player actually that can cover all three. That's actually what Jacobson gives you, though. He's actually the only player, I think, in terms of a loose forward that New Zealand has that can do the job in all three. That may be a bold
statement. I would argue, you know, he's played all three for the. Yeah,
I've never seen him play 7.
He's covered it for the Hurricanes.
Really? I've never seen him play 7. I know he plays 6. He's played 6 but why would he play 7? They have Duplessis Karifi there and Peter Lakai.
I know that he's come off the bench, though, as one of those replacements for that kind of position. It was early on in the season, you have to believe me, but he does offer you that versatility. And I guess the other side of it is, why do you need 7 guys who can all be different positions when they could just play their specialist positions in the first place? I think that if I was going to take Jacobson out, I would have put Peter Lakai in as the number 7.
I agree.
And I feel like he can actually offer you a little bit of cover, and maybe 6 as well. He's done throughout the season, I believe, or he might have played a bit of number 8. That Hurricanes loose forward trio were that good that they could chuck them anywhere.
He's actually more of a 7-8, I think, Peter Lakai. I wouldn't really consider him as a 6.
I am curious to see whether or not Jacobson's discipline costs them in any games, because if he's going to give away 2 penalties, that's 6 points, isn't it? If he's giving them away inside of the All Blacks half, and those points are going to be pretty tricky to be able to make back. But it's going to be interesting. I know that, like I said, Razor was talking about both sides of the ball, but he also mentioned about a little bit of the attitude about certain players. And do you think that's a Tutu going on his Instagram and captioning a post most hated with pictures of him with a Blues trophy? Do you think that probably, when you look at that as a selector, you go, right, this guy hasn't really learned? Because we've got to remember there was talks of a player, I don't want to say that this was Tutu, but there were talks of a player last year, after not making a Rugby World Cup squad, someone wasn't answering their phone. And that was when the All Blacks were trying to get in contact with him. And it was rumoured whether it was going to be a Kiriwani or maybe Hoskins Satutu. Do you think there's a bit of an attitude problem off the field for Satutu? You know, maybe
I don't really think
that could be why.
The reason why I say this is because there's a lot of ways in how players portray themselves, like in all sports. Like the way actually the best example I can give of this is actually Russell Westbrook within basketball, within the NBA. Like, he actually has that kind of that personality where you can hate him, kind of like in a way, like where, like, if you ask any media guy, like, fans love him. Like, fans will even be like, you love him or you hate him. And you can definitely tell from a discipline standpoint, like, you know, he's kind of like he's against, you know, he has that graft about him. But at the same time, I think he's also because of his pedigree, he kind of carries that, and that's what allows him to kind of flourish. And I think that's what the Tutu is in this case, where his pedigree, I think, is what allows him to flourish. But I do understand. But it's also at times where it's like, how do I say this? Like, because we are also now in a new age in terms of like social media and all that, then yes, it can also be portrayed as like, because he put an Instagram post out saying most hated, then that's like the you know, the X right there, that he hasn't learned his lesson or that. But I think it's just more to kind of just I'm just shocked though. I'm still shocked, by the way, about Satutu. I think a lot of people are still shocked. Like, I'm just being honest. Like, this is probably the one that shocked me the most out of All Blacks like exclusions. Like, I mean, I was shocked by Ben Lamb not making it within 1 year, because like he was sensational 1 year for the Hurricanes. There was 1 year for Lemape not getting into the World Cup squad. I mean, I'm trying to think who else. Like, Lachlan Boshier was another one. Who all three of them have had excellent seasons, similar now towards Hoskins and Tutu, but were not selected on form. They were like they just chose other players ahead of them. So it's just one of those where I was very surprised. I honestly was just very surprised about it. But look, down to your question, yes, it can obviously have an effect in terms of, I guess, how the coaches view him, but as well as the kind of just like, I guess, people in general. But at the same time, I think a lot of people actually appreciate that, because it's also like, it takes courage to actually do that. Like, you can sit behind you can sit like kind of just there, just take it. Whereas like you actually have the opportunity. You have a big chance actually, because you know how many people kind of follow you. You're kind of like an idol to a lot of to a lot of people. So to kind of just put yourself out there, to kind of just say, look, I mean, he did it in a way which I thought, yes, let's say most hated. Like he could have just said that. He could have just had a whole paragraph. I think that's what I would have done. Like just had a whole paragraph. Like tell them I understand the All Black selection, and people may be against it or whatever, but I'm gonna do my best and kind of continue on. And like that would have been a better way to go about it. I think that would have been a better way to go about it. But
that's going to be the interesting part, is whether or not he takes on what Razor and whatnot have told him. Because I know that there were talks of course, each player getting told what they did wrong and what they want to see improvements for the All Black squad. I'm curious to see if Sotutu puts his head down, really starts to work on that defence, whether we see those improvements or whether it is going to be that attitude of, oh, but look at what I did on attack. So, if you don't want me, someone will. I'll go to Fiji or I'll go play for England, because I think those are the two that he's eligible for, and he's eligible next year. So, he's extended his contract with the Blues, which will be it's going to be an interesting one for him. But, yeah, I hope he doesn't, just drop his head and go, nah, they're wrong, I'm right. Someone's going to want me. He's just got to, you got to knuckle down. You got to prove them wrong. And that's what he did, I believe, after that Rugby World Cup. He got left out of that squad probably for similar reasons. But now he's come back and he's had a great season. He's probably unlucky that he hasn't been selected there.
But for that time, I wouldn't say I don't think he was in the conversation. Just to be frank, I don't think he was in the conversation at all last year, because his form wasn't as good as this year. Like I'm just being very honest. Like he was not in the conversation last year. Like Akira was probably more in the conversations because of positional wise.
But he did expect to get selected, didn't he?
Did he?
Yeah, there was quite a outroar after that World Cup squad was announced that he wasn't a part of it, and he was one of the people who felt like he should have been there.
I actually can't remember. I can't draw my memory back to that, but I will say this time around I understand it a lot more. Like it's one of those cases where, because I think there's I think a lot of the fan, you can normally I've gone through all the comments in terms of a lot of videos, even on other channels, it's very 50-50, by the way. It's not where it's completely one-sided where fans are like, oh yeah, this is you didn't deserve to get in, there's better players than that. No, there's actually fans who are like, have you guys looked at what he did this year? Do you guys understand the positional, what he can bring towards that? Or but there's cases as well, actually we have to also remember that this is just for this series. This is just for the series against England, as well as just Fiji. He still has the opportunity to be selected. And again, he wasn't actually, I'm not sure if we'll mention it or not, but the Maori All Black squad was also announced as well, and he wasn't a part of that one. So it's my expectation probably that he's still going to be kind of in kind of the standby kind of situation to be called up if needed. But
he's also not Maori though, is he?
Is he not?
I don't think so. I think he's Fijian as the back.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Ancestry.
Yeah. So it's one of those where I hope he gets a chance. I hope he gets a chance within the Rugby Championship, or if it's the Automation Series, we'll have to wait and see. But I am also excited to see what Wallace Atiti can do, because I want to see him get at least some minutes, because I don't really expect him to get a lot of minutes, to be frank, within that England series. But I do expect him to get minutes within that Fiji game. I want to see him start, if preferably actually. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. But look, overall good squad. I think overall good squad there by the All Blacks. Happy to see George Bell get selected. Again, it was 50-50 between Riccatelli, but I actually don't mind it. Again, Billy Proctor, well done to him, because he's fully deserved it on the back of his season that he's had for the Hurricanes. Simon Pratt-Feta, is one that kind of caught me off guard, because yes, I did predict him in my prediction, but at the same time, I was still a bit caught off guard, because there are other fullbacks, particularly Ruben Love or Stevenson, who are definitely in the conversation. But it's kind of what I said within my updated prediction, where it comes down towards the amount of playing the games in the playoffs. And to be fair to him, he played all three. He was a part of all three games, and he was pretty solid throughout all three of them. Whereas Ruben Love and Stevenson, both of them missed either a quarterfinal or a semi. So it was one of those that kind of let them down in that kind of that situation. But yeah, look, it's one of those where I'm trying to think, is there anyone else we've missed out? In terms of the debutants, there's Wallace Atiti.
You haven't seen Cortez Ratma yet.
Cortez Ratma, that's the other one. Yeah, happy for him. That's a good one to see. Happy to see him getting selected. Same with TJ actually in a way, like because again, obviously, no, he's not like a uncapped player, but it's just good to see him back in the All Blacks kind of frame because he's a player who definitely will be considered to start or even come off the bench because again, that's what he's been known to do. Actually, he's been more of an impact player throughout his career for the All Blacks because when you're having someone like Aaron Smith there, it's pretty hard to get a start at times. But so it'll be very interesting to see who kind of the All Blacks go with there because I'm actually thinking I don't think it's actually a certified. I don't think there's one certified player actually who's going to get it. I think you can make an argument for all three of them to actually start against England. So it's going to be very fascinating to see who they choose to go with because, it could depend on the team. It could depend on who they face. But again, you also have to remember, like, with Roygaard kind of out for the meantime, like, who do you want to kind of play more minutes now? Like, that's kind of the way I also think about it. So we'll have to wait and see what they go with. But anyway, moving away then from the All Blacks kind of squad kind of announcement to the last one, which is the Wallabies. Again, the Wallabies were actually the first team out of all three of them to announce their squad, and there were definitely some big surprises in here as well. Like, I mean, right off the back, I mean, Joe Schmidt choosing not to select any overseas players. I mean, that's like the big kind of statement right there. So not going with Corbetti, not going with Sami Karevi, not going with Will Skelton. I mean, I'm trying to think who else. I mean, I think those are the big three really. But it is crazy. Kind of that. I mean, I like the decision actually. I actually kind of like the decision because he's kind of reverting back towards what the All Blacks do in terms of their policy of just selecting within New Zealand. So he's done that in Australia's case here. And yeah, I think overall, I think a lot of players have done well to get in. I mean, I was particularly happy by the kind of the hookers that got selected because there were, I've always been very kind of let down by the selections they've made in hookers because I've never really liked Jordi Nuese as a hooker for the Wallabies. I just don't think his lineup accuracy has just never been good enough. And then again with Dave Parecki, he's been out for the whole year for the Waratahs, so I kind of went against him. So I was very happy they went with the likes of Matt Fazer there, as well as Nasler in there, as well as Billy Pollard. So happy for all three of them to get in. In terms of the locks, I mean, I think the one that surprised me, what caught me off guard, was Josh Canham. I mean, I'm not sure about yourself, but did you think he would have had a chance in this team?
I did think that he was definitely in the running. There were a few other guys who were really close to that selection as well. Like, I know that people were complaining a bit about no Ryan Lonergan for this one. And then, there were people complaining about Corey Toole, of course, not realising that he was going to the sevens. Exactly. So there was already, you look at social media and it's just it's an absolute just mess, I guess you could say. Like, people were calling for Joe Schmidt to be sacked for not picking Corey Toole, yet if they did a little tiny bit of research, they'd realise he is bound for the Olympics. He wants that gold rather than at this stage tore up against Wales and Georgia. Like, that's the other side of things. Like, you're in that situation now. You probably don't need to select overseas players for matches up against the Welsh and Georgia, and that's nothing to discredit those two sides. But at the same time, you want to show off your homegrown talent and you want to show off the ones who are playing in Australia at the moment. Like, yes, having those guys would have helped them, but then, do they get added in for the Rugby Championship perhaps is when you start bringing some of those overseas guys in.
That's when I would do it.
Yeah, I think that they should still be strong enough. Harry Wilson, how far along is he from his injury? Because I know that he's close to back, isn't he? But he's recovered pretty quickly from his injury, isn't he?
Yeah. So I mean, from listening to what he said on a podcast I was watching, it seems like he's kind of timing that Reds versus Wales game. So he won't be available for the Wales fixtures for the. I don't think he'll be available in time. I mean, maybe for that Georgia one, we'll have to wait and see. That's probably the one where maybe he could make it, but I don't think we can consider him for those Wales games just because for what I heard previously, like I think it was around 2 weeks ago, that was kind of like the kind of deadline, what kind of the scheduling that he thought he would get into. So maybe that's changed. We'll have to wait and see. But from my understanding, he'll only be available from, I guess, the Rugby Championship onwards. Look, I mean, there's still some good players that they've gone with. I mean, definitely a few surprises though. I mean, like the two big ones I think in this team were Angus Blythe, I'd say, in terms of locking position, as well as David Fawali there in terms of the centers, because both of them I never even. I mean, I'm not sure about you, but I never even considered both of them in terms of my Wallabies kind of predictions. So it was kind of two that kind of caught me off guard, but. But I understand. I mean, I understand a lot about Angus Blythe in terms of his selection, just because he's actually very tall for for a lock, and when they're not considering a player like Isaac Rodder, who's I think he's officially left now to go overseas, and again, there's like just it's one of those like where you need someone kind of about size and stature, and with not selecting a player like Will Skelton as well, I think it kind of forces you to go in that direction, and that's kind of what went against Josh Cannon because. Not to discredit him, but he's just a bit smaller in terms of a lock. So I think that kind of just went against him slightly. But I would still say he's had the better season. So it's a bit that was why I was a bit surprised by it, because I think for what I saw, he's only had like 5 games for this year in terms of Super Rugby, like 3 starts, 2 off the bench. So that's one that kind of got me off guard. And then with David Fawley getting selected. I mean, it's understandable because they haven't gone with Karevi, and they need kind of a backup in terms of that 12 position for Hunter Basami. But at the same time, you have a player there like Hamish Stewart, who's been playing 12 for the Western Force. So I would assume that's the cover for the 12. But again, it is a very big squad. It's 38 players, so they got to kind of cover a lot of gaps in there. But yeah, I mean, again, I think Hamish Stewart, I was very happy to see included. I mean, him and Liam Wright, I mean, are probably the 2 ones that are always on the cusp of making a Wallaby squad, but haven't been included in the past. So I was very pleased to see both of them get selected. I think they've been great for their clubs this year, and just happy to see them kind of get involved for the Wallabies. But for yourself, I mean, were there any other players that you were happy to see kind of included in this?
Well, I was going to ask you the question, are you concerned that those type of guys who are always on the fringes, when it gets condensed a little bit more for the Rugby Championship and maybe those overseas guys come in, do you see them as the ones who unfortunately may end up missing out again for the Wallabies?
No, I actually don't think so. Because the thing is, I actually prefer. I mean, I like Liam Wright and Hamish Stewart a lot. So I particularly like Hamish Stewart a lot. Like, he's been so consistent throughout his time for the Reds, as well as kind of his first season for the Western Force. So it's been one of those where I mean, I've been pretty good. I would like him involved actually in terms of the setup. Again, I prefer him actually as the cover to Hunter Basami if that's the direction they want to go on forward, depending on, of course, what happens with Karevi, if they want to go overseas or not. But I think overall, I like the squad. I mean, good to see Curtly Bill included in there, because again, they do need a bit of experience because there's a lack of experience in terms of the squad. So it's good to kind of have a player like that with his kind of status and kind of his stature in terms of the game. Again, I think him and James Slipper are probably the most capped players in terms of that squad. So it's good to have a player like within the backs as well as the forwards. So I kind of like that aspect of it. And again, with the fly-offs, they've gone with Furry. So Ben Donaldson, Noah Sale, and Tom Lana gets in. So pleased for him to get in. And of course, that is. I think actually there was a case he actually would have got in. Actually, I think not the like. I actually think he was always going to get in, because I think Carter Gordon would have been in part of this conversation. But I think because Ben Donaldson covers that 15, I think all 4 of them were actually going to get selected. But because of his kind of deciding to go towards NRL, same with Mark Narkwantawasi, kind of confirmed that ages ago. But overall, I'm just happy with this team. Really good to see a lot of these players included. Like Len Ikitau as well, another player that wasn't in part of the World Cup squad, like just wasn't chosen by Eddie Jones for some weird reason. So I mean, he's always been a great player. So I'm happy to see him get involved. I'm trying to think who else. I mean, what am I on about? The reason why he didn't get selected was because of his injury he picked up in the Rugby Championship. So actually, that's my bad. That's actually my bad. But look, it's a good squad. It's a good squad. But is there any players that you were surprised that didn't get in? Like, was there like a player that you thought, wow, like I'm surprised he didn't get in?
I know that people love a bolter, Tim, don't they? And I know that some people, definitely the ones from Queensland, were hoping a certain winger might have found his name on that Wallabies list. Of course, the youngster Tim Ryan out on the wing. Maybe next year could be when we see him. That is if the NRL don't go and snatch him up, of course. But, I feel like the time will come for those young guys, because when you look through at the squad, if we are going to start to see no more Marika Korombeti and Curtly Bill, he's not going to be able to do it forever. So you're going to start to have those gaps in that back 3, and then that is when those young guys, they can stay consistent. That is when they'll get their opportunities. Andrew Callaway, I'm very curious to see whether or not they play him. I'd assume they'd have him as a 15 for the Wallabies, but you just never know. They might actually consider putting him out on the wing with Curtly Bill at 15, maybe could even be the way that they end up shaping it. So
you think currently Bill's going to start? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know what Joe Schmidt's plan is. That's the thing though. Like in terms of those fullbacks, you know,
I think there's a clear choice in the fullback. You can make the argument, of course, of Andrew Kellaway, but I think it's very clear in terms of who you select there. I think you just got to go with Tom Wright. He's just the.
But then do they play him out on the wing? You know,
but it
wouldn't make sense.
Better. I think Kellaway's always been a better player in the wing than Wright. Like we've seen this in the past. So let's hope.
It's a weird one though, because with such a big squad, you just never know what the tactics are going to be. Like, unfortunately, they've only got 3 games. They need like 5 so that we can really see the squad rotated enough so that we actually get to see everyone in action. But yeah, like Darby Lancaster, is he going to get a start at 11?
So this is what I was going to say, by the way. So it's actually interesting. I want to get your take on this because I'm probably going to, like, I don't know. Like, I'm actually still confused. I actually don't know which way I'm kind of flipping. But they don't actually, I don't think there's a guaranteed in terms of that 11 spot there. I mean, like, because they've gone with Darby Lancaster as well as Dylan Peach. I think those 2 are probably the 2 kind of up for grabs in terms of 11 position, unless there's someone else you can think of. Because, I mean, when I'm thinking about the other players, like you have like Josh Fluke, who again is a center, but he can cover that 14. That's what he's been known to do. Then you have like Felipe Dangado, who's another player who plays at center, but could cover that 11 if you wanted him to. So that's the other player that you can consider. So I don't think there's actually a certified 11 in there. Like again, this is where you can tell me if you think there's a standout choice there. But I think putting Darby Lancaster in there, like I don't know if that's the right choice. Like by the way, I love choosing a youth. Like I love choosing the youth kind of over the experience when it comes to those positions because you want to see kind of that pace and kind of just like that next big thing really. But I don't know. I may even be swayed to go Dylan Peach in this. What's your thought?
Well, it's going to be an interesting one because, you know, throughout this back line, we're going to see quite a few Brumbies players. But, of course, with Lancaster as well as Dylan Peach, they're going to be slightly the odd one out because if you got Tom Wright at fullback, Kellaway, if you had Kellaway right wing, Peach left wing, you've got the new combination maybe for next year for the Tars. Could be a possibility, seeing as Kellaway is heading to the Waratahs. But it's a tricky one because, like we said, they've got such a long list and too many players that play multiple spots. That's the problem at the moment. Too much versatility, Tim. There's no obvious options. Even the 10 jersey, you could argue, is getting shuffled between the 3 of them because are you playing Donaldson as a 10 or are you playing him as a fullback? Because if you're playing him as a 10, he's probably second choice at the moment, whereas if you're playing him as a fullback, he's probably about 3rd or 4th. So it's a very tricky one. I don't like making decisions.
Donaldson's good though. This is the thing. Like I don't. Maybe I'm wrong in saying this, by the way, guys. But like I've always said that Noah Sales should be the starting 10. But throughout this year, and I mean, again, this is where maybe where my bias comes in, or just the games I watch will pay attention the most in. Both games the Brumbies played against the Blues, like he was nowhere to be seen. Like he was nowhere to be seen. And I mean, and the Blues were the best team without Super Rugby. So like, you want to kind of see a bit about him within those games and kind of just show a bit of, I guess, presence. So yeah, just I wish there was just more involvement with him within those type of games because I would have been like a lot more like I just 100% guaranteed on him starting. But Ben Donaldson was pretty impressive, I'd say, throughout kind of the late stages of the Super Rugby season. So I don't know. Maybe they go with a guy like him, or even you go with like Tom Liner there because he's been pretty consistent throughout for the Reds. So it'll be interesting to see what Joe Schmidt does here. But look, I'm excited. I'm excited. It's a new cycle for the Wallabies under a new coach as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to see what they can do. And yeah, I'm pretty hopeful actually that the Wallabies side can kind of change things around and kind of change the culture as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to see what they can do. But yeah, I think that's it, kind of, folks. We're going to leave it there. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. It's a very long episode, but I hope you guys kind of enjoyed the breakdown we had here. But yeah, make sure, guys, to like the video, subscribe to our channel, check out our respective channels, and yeah, see you guys next time.